I'm delighted that so many of you are able to join us today for Habitat Banks Generating Dividends for People, Place and Nature. My name is Victoria Bradford Keegan. I'm going to be the host today. I'm joined by an array of colleagues from Plymouth City Council who will be talking about their journey towards habitat banking and beyond. This work has been a number of years in the making, has been funded as part of a number of different projects, primarily the Future Parks Accelerator, and also the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund. So we're really grateful to the funders of the work, but also today's webinar has been made possible through funding from Natural England. So we're really grateful to the generosity of all the funders involved in both today's webinar and also the work itself. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We've got presentations from Plymouth City Council, as I said, and in just a moment I'm going to hand over to Councillor Tom Briars-Delve, who will be followed by a number of his colleagues who'll be talking about the journey towards habitat banking and beyond, actually. And no doubt the two characters on the slide will also make an appearance at some point today. Not a live appearance, but I'm sure they'll get named today. So I will leave you in the very capable hands of Councillor Tom Briars-Delve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria. My name's Tom Briars-Delve. I'm the Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change at Plymouth City Council. And like Victoria said, it's really exciting to see well over 100 people wanting to hear more about the work that we're doing on habitat banks. So as you'll know, if you've signed up for this, Plymouth was the first local authority in the country to create a habitat bank and to invest its own finance within it. We're really excited to have this opportunity to talk about the journey we've been on, the risks, the innovation, the transformation, and the benefits that we're leading up to. There's been opportunities within the Environment Act and the new legislation that's been coming through that we'll be going through in a bit more detail. But we really want to go through that learning process in some more detail, the physical changes, the funding, but also the people and the partnerships that have really made this possible. It takes a bit of bravery and commitment, but we really believe that this will be worth it and that there's going to be huge benefits for both people and nature as a result. And finally, if we can move on to the next slide. So in terms of this not just being something that we've done ourselves as a local authority, this just would not have been possible without the help and support of various partners, both in terms of funding, specific advice, and of course Finance Earth and the work that they've been doing on the green finance model as well. So thank you to all of those on the screen and everyone else who's made this journey possible. So if I can hand over to Philip, who I believe is going to talk in a bit more detail about our context as a city.
Hello, as you can tell, I'm not Philip. Unfortunately, Philip will be joining for the panel debate, but my name is Kat Dealey. I'm Head of Environmental Planning at Plymouth City Council, and I will just be covering this next section. So just to give those of you who don't know Plymouth very well a bit of context, hopefully by now the message is getting out there that we're a very green and blue city. We're the 15th largest city in the country, and the biggest urban centre for the southwest. We've got a real specialism and excellence going around our marine tech, obviously with having the UK's first national marine park on our doorstep and a variety of really excellent institutions around marine. That's not surprising, and that also links in around our specialism around defence. Europe's biggest, well, certainly Western Europe's biggest naval base, which links into our advanced engineering. And we also have a lot of specialisms around medical and life sciences. And one of the areas that's really growing is around our creative, digital and culture and tourism. Again, really linked into our place in the country. So we're also a university city. So growing those amazing minds, we have more than 25,000 students. And that's across a number of institutions. So we're really fortunate in terms of number of institutes that are training our young minds. And we have a really good transformation programme underway. This has been going for probably 5 to 10 years in earnest. And over the next 5 years, we've got an investment pipeline of around 1 billion in the city. So this is definitely not a place where nothing is happening in terms of other growth elements, but we're also got a really good track record as working in partnership, and I think you'll see that that's really important about why we think about how we use nature in the city going forwards. We've got a great employment and growth zone in our urban fringe, so working with our partners across the border, really, really important. And we are on a mission, if you like, to reinvent ourselves. So, you know, many years ago, people thought we were just the dockyard. Now, the dockyard is incredibly important to the city, but I'm hoping what will start to come across in this is there's reinvention in a lot of other ways as well. I'm going to pass over to David just to talk about that's all the good bits, but we're not without challenges.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. David Northey, Service Director for Finance, the Section 151 Officer. And you catch me on a rare afternoon where I've got a smile on my face because I'm actually very supportive of what the team have put together here, and we'll come on to that probably a little bit later. But just a bit of background, I suppose, of where we find ourselves in Plymouth. There's quite a few bullet points on the slide. I'll try and cover them as best I can, but just to make it awkward, I won't go in the order that they appear on the screen. So if you're paying attention, we'll work the way through them. So obviously, like most cities, we do have complex challenges here, and we do need to come up with a new way of approaching the fact that demand continues to increase. You all know that, and you also know that the funding envelope continues to go down. So we're in that position, and we've got to come up with some great ideas to help us through that. So just thinking about the bullet points we've got in front of us, we've got economy there. Plymouth has a low productivity economy with the GVA per hour worked. It's equivalent to about 85.9% of the UK average. Our business startup rates, business density and innovation levels are some of the lowest in the country. And we are a low wage economy with Plymouth workers receiving approximately £521 as their weekly average compared to the national average of 577. Let's think about connectivity. I mean, it's great where we are. We are Britain's ocean city. We've got a wonderful place to work and live, but we are way down and cut off. So when any of us want to go up on a trip to London, normally the best way to do it is by rail. And the average rail journey time from Plymouth to London, which is 3 to 3.5 hours, depending on which train you get on, is actually 8 minutes slower than if I was travelling from Newcastle to London, even though we're 40 miles closer. So think about that one for a little while, and think about the problems we have when we have all the winter storms and what that does to our connectivity. In terms of deprivation, well, just under 1 in 5 children in Plymouth is estimated to be living in poverty. 1 in 5 children, just think about that for a second. Plymouth is within the 20% most deprived local authority districts in England, and 35% of working age adults who are economically inactive are classed as long-term sick, compared to just under 24.6 nationally. Health and well-being, well, the life expectancy gap between different areas of the city can be as much as 7.5 years. Significantly worse performance than the rest of England, as measured on 14 of the 32 health indicators in the annual health profile. If we take a quick look at education, 61% of secondary schools have a recorded judgment of good or outstanding in their overall effectiveness, but this compares to 76% nationally. And 37.7% of people aged 16 to 64 have an MVQ4 plus qualification, compared to 43.5% nationally. I'm an accountant, be prepared for all the stats. In terms of climate resilience, and this is where this project really gets you excited, we are a coastal city. I mean, I'm stating the obvious, got the great pictures behind us. So we are a coastal city, and we will be affected by increased storminess, rainfall events, and they're already having large impacts on systems not designed for the severity of events, and many of our infrastructure assets are, of course, on the coast. Conversely, after recent summers, what will living in a hotter city, or what will living, I'll get there in a minute, what will living in a hotter city be like and will that accelerate existing challenges? So we get very wet winters. I don't think it stopped raining here since about September, and occasionally we get a hot day that causes other problems. Move on. Net zero is another one of our bullet points. We have a very ambitious net zero to 2030 ambition. So net zero by 2030. It seems a long way away, but it will be here before we blink. That is indeed a challenge that we have to meet, and that is why this is an important part of our plans. Just in terms of finance, well, we've all got the challenges. You know these as well as I do. I've talked about the fact that demand goes up and the funding envelope goes down. I'm not going to complain. We're in quite a safe position for a minute. We've just approved a balanced budget for 24-25, which has enabled us to put a lot of growth into the areas that we're all experiencing problems with, which is children's social care, adult social care, SEND, homeschool transport, all the issues that are national but are affecting us in Plymouth, but we've been able to cover those off. But of course, money is very tight. You may have heard recently, because we were mentioned with all the other authorities, about our capitalisation direction from DLUC. Let's just be clear, we were not one of the local authorities requesting to borrow funds. This was to do with a technical issue back in October 2019, so we won't be borrowing money in order to balance our books. But that said, to get us through the current year, we've had to make savings in excess of 20 million, and no one can convince me that things will get easier as we move forward into 24-25. So that's why I'm excited by projects like this one that come forward. They're new, they're exciting, and for the modest investment, that's the words that were put to me by Kat, of 500,000 at a competitive interest rate. She has guaranteed that I will see at least £128,000 per annum, sorry, 187 even per annum, flowing back into the system, and that's based on the 3 trial sites. So if we can get this to work and we can expand, then things can only get better. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next slide, please. So I think we wanted to show that just so that we're not in a different position than any other local authority. We're having the same challenges, and actually, as a big city, we have the same challenges around deprivation and aspiration that many others do. So this Habitat Bank hasn't come around because we're in a very fortunate position. It's more actually that we really want to play to our strengths. So through all those challenges, what we've been looking at more widely as a programme is how does nature play its part in meeting those challenges. So we are a green-blue city. It's one of our, they're our greatest assets that we really need to use, and they can really help meet many of these challenges. So before you on the screen now is a map from our joint local plan. So we've known for a very long time, it's been understood by senior officers and councillors that our natural assets are essential to the sustainable growth of our city and the well-being of our communities. And these are all of the sites that have been allocated and designated through that planning process as basically key essential infrastructure for the city as it grows, in the same way we allocated the buildings for housing and for employment. So we are really looking at how we use these sites, but what we do know in terms of the financial situation we're in is if we want to do more, we need to find different ways of funding it. So we have great ambitions around how we use these spaces, and now we need to look at new funding models and new approaches to make sure not only these places are secure, but they have a hugely thriving future that allows people and nature to coexist in the city to meet those greatest challenges. So why a Habitat Bank? Seems a rather long jump between the city's got massive challenges and we've got lots of green space. So we basically did a review about how we would fund our spaces differently. And obviously we had the Environment Act coming along the line. So we had a number of issues that were the same as any other place. We have budget pressures, David outlined this year, but that is every year we have that budget pressure that we need to look through, and we need to maintain our natural spaces. The Environment Act came up with the mechanism, but it also creates a lot more duties on local authority, and most of those are not going to have ongoing new burdens funding to help us meet those. So we have this kind of double benefit, or a benefit and a disbenefit with the Environment Act of more duties. But the thing it did create was a new market for the biodiversity units. So we've all known for a very long time that biodiversity and nature has a great role in cities and urban spaces, but actually it's a non-monetizable benefit, and that was what was causing us some issues in terms of how do we get more investment in. This new market basically is a game changer. Obviously, it requires maintenance of habitats for a minimum of 30 years, but that is hugely beneficial when local authority budgets are year on year, and any grants we get in are usually a maximum of 5. It gives us that longevity. And the interaction, one of the things we do have to view as a challenge is how the new biodiversity net gain duty, so coming out of the environment, how will that impact other sectors and other things we want to deliver? And the biggest challenge and issue that we've come across so far is how that duty will interact with things like affordable housing delivery. In Plymouth, our land prices, etc., don't allow for huge viability, so that was already challenged. So we had to address those, which is why we decided that rather than allow this to come through and see what happened, we would be proactive in looking at setting up the Habitat Bank. Basically, it helps us in that first model review of turning financial liabilities into self-sustaining income assets, which is what we always wanted, but we needed a market to be able to trade that natural services in. We can capture the biodiversity unit income and ensure that that goes back into to benefit Plymouth's nature and people. We also have more control over site-specific biodiversity. So, by owning the Habitat Bank, by using land, we can ensure that we get really good connectivity with our nature sites. And it also means that we get the right kind of green space in the right place, and it's delivered to really high quality standards to meet the other benefits we talked about earlier around wellbeing and attainment. I find it, it's good for developers. When this started, there was a lot of concern about whether there would be enough local units. Would those units have to be bought elsewhere? And we've already had really good engagement with our local agents forum around how they can access the Habitat Bank if they're looking for biodiversity units, and that's been really positive so far. Thank you. Next slide. So it's probably worth setting out the principles. It was really important to us that this was seen as a really high quality solution to the opportunities and challenges that the Environment Act set before us. And there's some really fundamental foundation principles that we worked up with stakeholders and we've been holding ourselves to as we've been working through those. So we wanted to make sure that additionality was achieved, that there was real transparency and accountability. So we absolutely on no level wanted to see any words like greenwashing or you're not actually achieving this through this programme. So transparency and accountability was key. We wanted a proactive joined up approach to offsetting. So we weren't going to wait to see what had happened in the city. Obviously, one of our key concerns was nature would leave the city because we did try and engage with others that are running habitat banks, and urban is quite complicated. So they weren't very interested in working with us, and therefore our developers developing within our city would have had to buy those units elsewhere. We wanted a robust governance framework, which also helped with that transparency and accountability. And we wanted to make sure our monitoring and measures were really clear and our metrics very obvious. So within each of the 3 areas of environment, social and economic, we also wanted to make sure that we were doing the best in class. So starting with environment, we obviously, first protocol was to adhere to the mitigation hierarchy. Our habitat bank is when nothing else can be done on site, and we would be looking for developers to ensure that they followed everything we would usually do around ensuring avoiding impact becomes the first, maintaining on site, etc. We also wanted to deliver really high quality habitats and show that we could maintain them and protect them in the long term. So our habitat bank would enable us to do that. Social, really key if you're trying to do nature enhancement near people. We needed to maintain and enhance equitable public access and account for those costs within what we're doing. But it also ensured that we wouldn't have any socio-economic distortions. So we wanted to make sure we kept nature near people and that there was a real benefit to that. And obviously from an economic point of view, we wanted a good solution for our developers, offer a fair return to our investors and to support the local economy. So we keep coming back to these as we've developed the Habitat Bank, and we will continue as we roll it out. Next slide, please. So we often get asked, that all sounds great, but how does it actually work in practice, and how does the money run around the system in a way that works? So following this little diagram, blue box is your investor and the money goes in. So that is about spending money on building the capital elements of the units. So that goes into the Habitat Bank, in our case, Ocean City Biodiversity. And from that, we create the market units. So we create our biodiversity net gain units by doing habitat restoration in advance of development impact. So that was always the big gain from biodiversity units from the previous section 106, where there would be impact, and then we'd go back and do mitigation. So we create the units. The Habitat Bank can then sell those units to developers, and the amount we sell them for will allow us to create those units, pay back the investor, and have a pot of money to maintain them in the long term. So it really is a kind of virtuous circle of the investor money in, the value for biodiversity created, selling those units to the developer, and that money that comes back from the developer allows us to repay the investment and shore up those units. And I'll pass over to Chris, who will give you a bit more detail about how that works.
So I think, yeah, we've kind of had a bit of a dive there into what the concept of habitat banking is and how it works, which is, I think, really useful to then kind of zoom back out again a little bit and look at kind of some of the opportunities more widely across the city. So realising that we had effectively an investable proposition with our habitat banking, we also, as part of that work, we also realised there were other potentially green finance opportunities across the city, and we needed to create a governance structure, a company structure to enable us to deliver against that. So this is kind of where we've got to. So we've created a vehicle called Ocean City Nature, and I'll come into some of the detail of how we've set that up and how that works in some slides coming up. But this is essentially what Ocean City Nature is about. So it has a vision of delivering, ecosystem services across the city. So realising value off those assets. And as you see, importantly, there are those missions across that kind of the environmental, social, and economic perspectives. So creating a nature-rich city, supporting thriving and empowered communities, and recognising value from ecosystem service delivery. All really key parts of what we want this to deliver. Next slide, please. So we just kind of go into here a bit more of the kind of the detail of how that works in practice. So Ocean City Nature is our strategic vehicle. So it's sitting in the box there, which says Ocean City Fund, which was kind of our working title when we were putting this together. That sits there as a company, which enables us to set up different investments. So it allows us to work with other forms of green finance, which you may be kind of familiar with, which potentially be realised. So these could be things like carbon, so looking at wood and carbon credits and realising some revenues off the back of that in a similar way to we would with the habitat banking. It could be doing work and looking at sustainable urban drainage systems, so looking at opportunities for raising investment and then generating revenues from providing parts of our city, green spaces in our grey spaces in our city to capture water and remove that from the combined sewage system. So this is the model which we've built up to enable us to realise all of these different opportunities and address many of those challenges which we've talked about in previous slides. I think it's important to say that, yeah, when we're talking about some of these revenues, we need to be able to aggregate them. So to realise some of the investment which we see coming forward, that investment will be at scale. And so we need to have a vehicle which sits at the top of that, which enables investment at scale, and then to filter down to realising some investable projects and propositions on the ground, which would be those investment vehicles there. So, for example, Subfund A is effectively our habitat bank, which you've just seen in the previous slide, and the model which worked around that. please. And I'll go into a few details here on kind of how do we realise this and how do we make this happen within Plymouth City Council. So the work that we've been doing has taken a long time. So 18 months for us to get through 3 executive decisions, to kind of familiarise and explain this concept to our senior managers, to ourselves, even to myself. I've learned an awful lot around finance and investment, and working with colleagues in the council has been really critical to ensuring the success of this project. Everyone's been on a learning journey in terms of what we've learned through this process. So the first decision point which we reached back in November 21 was when we were presenting this. First of all, we needed to look at the options. The Environment Act presented us with these challenges and opportunities as we've described, but there are a number of different options available to us and open to us to work to those. That could be from doing nothing. That could be looking at an in-house vehicle, or it could be looking at setting up an arm's length company, which is what we've done, to enable us to take advantage of those opportunities. So in November 21, the Cabinet signed off on effectively that was the preferred option to take forward. And then that gave us the mandate to go and work up some of the detail around the company structure and the governance arrangements which we need to have in place to build that up. So some really critical work, it's really detailed work which we did with some of our partners, consultants, Finance Earth and Freeth worked with us really closely to enable us to reach that point, which we presented in March 22. And again, Cabinet, our corporate management team and Cabinet were happy with that. So we were able to move forward with that proposal. That said, that gave us then that ability to go forward and set up those companies. And then in June 23, we came back with sort of a more detailed business case, which presented the case for investment from PCC to secure a £500,000 loan, as David's described. So we can invest in that vehicle, start work on site to invest in the sites, realise the biodiversity units, and now we're in a position just about to begin start making sales to developers. So key to that was there was a lot of scrutiny around this, very innovative approach. So we did take this to a cross-party scrutiny session to make sure that the governance around this was scrutinised adequately, and had really good, really positive support from members across the board on that. One thing here to mention as well is, in part of this process, working with different departments and external stakeholders as well, such as sort of developers, to enable us to build up a really robust and strong business case was really key to the success. So this is the company structure which we've realised. Just put it down really simply in a slide here. So Plymouth City Council, so Ocean Sea Nature is a company limited by guarantee, so it's at arm's length of Plymouth City Council. Plymouth City Council is the sole member of that company. And as I said, it acts as a strategic vehicle, so sitting at the head of that kind of green finance portfolio, and has a strategic role around kind of deciding on how that operates. And beneath that, our habitat bank, Ocean City Biodiversity, is established as a company limited by shares. One shareholder is Ocean City Nature, and that is the vehicle in which we're putting our £500,000 worth of investment. And effectively, that is our operational vehicle. So that vehicle holds the responsibility for ensuring that we're compliant with the biodiversity net gain regulations and the requirements from Natural England through the biodiversity net gain register. In terms of the board membership of that, Ocean City Nature is a board with PCC representatives, officers and directors sitting on that board. That will broaden in terms of being a broader directorship on that board, to make sure we've got good representation to recognise the kind of broad beneficiaries which Ocean City Nature works towards delivering to and for. And as I said, back to the top there, Plymouth City Council kind of remains as the sole member of the company, and kind of has some reserved matters kind of in place to protect kind of itself in that relationship. So in terms of just what we've done on the ground, and just to give a bit of flavour about what's happening. So we've got 3 pilot sites established, which are within our habitat bank. You can see them on the map there. As you can see, they're kind of broadly spread across the city. It was difficult to do with just choosing 3 sites. Just over 100 hectares in total, and they are 2 of those sites are local nature reserves, so they're publicly accessible sites, which is a really important aspect, going back to the principles which Kat described earlier, ensuring that where we're delivering high quality nature sites, we're doing that close to people, and the people can access those sites, and then obviously access the benefits that we know that brings from people being in high quality natural spaces. So we used a broad set of assessment criteria covering environmental, social and economic perspectives to enable us to select from a site grouping of about 30 sites to narrow it down to these 3 sites to ensure that we had a really robust set of pilot sites to work with in the first instance. And then the work from that, we detailed the habitat management plans for those sites, which gave us a really kind of detailed assessment of the biodiversity net gain opportunity, and also what we needed to do to enable us to realise that biodiversity net gain. And that set the wheels in motion in terms of our business modelling and building a really solid business case. So lots of detail work behind that. And there's a webinar tomorrow which goes into a lot more detail around how we set that up and some of the mechanisms and tools we use to develop that. I think just one thing to highlight there is the importance of a robust habitat management plan in this case, both for setting up a habitat bank, but also in terms of the documentation you need to enable you to register that with the biodiversity net gain register nationally. And this one, David will be very pleased about this slide, I'm sure. Lots of numbers there, which kind of give a bit of an insight into the business case which we have built up. So as you can see there, we've got £500,000 investment. And PCC, as we said, is the first investor in the Habitat Bank. PCC realised the broad benefits which cut across kind of so many agendas which the city has in terms of delivering this, not just about nature, but it's about some of those social, the social value and the social agendas which we all work towards. And that's the investment is a repayable loan and to deliver those biodiversity units across those 3 sites. So that's you can see where they're broadly split out where that capital expenditure goes on some project development costs which are still in play, and then also kind of majority of that is going against actually capital works on site to realise this. In terms of the operational costs there on the right hand side, you'll see then that money is broadly spent on the site, so a 30-year period. So a lot of the cost comes because it's spread over that 30-year period. So over £5 million worth of cost in terms of managing and maintaining those sites for the long term, and also kind of management costs. But if you add up those 2 lines, that project maintenance line and the PCC management line, effectively that 5.3 million gives you an indication of the level of revenues which are generated over this period, which will flow back to Plymouth City Council through the operation of the Habitat Bank. I think is, in terms of scale and opportunity, just gives a bit of an indication of how well that works. Okay, I'm going to hand back over to Councillor Tom Briars-Delve, who's going to pick up some further insights.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris done an excellent job there going through the governance structures and the finance of this. But one of the things that I wanted to touch upon was the wider co-benefits of it. One of the things that really matters to us in Plymouth is on place-based delivery. And what do we mean by that? Well, we want place to be something which isn't just about one particular aspect, but which is helping communities across the board. And so we're not just looking at transport in isolation or housing in isolation, but we're connecting all of these together where possible and really trying to put nature at the heart of that. It's really important to us that it doesn't sit outside of our city vision, something like this on the environment, that underpins all of those other priorities. Those of you with a financial interest like David will hopefully appreciate that the multiple benefits of our urban natural spaces are well known, and we did a natural capital accounts study looking at the wider benefits of this in 2021, and that illustrated that the city's parks and green spaces provide £186 million per annum in wider benefits across the city. So integrating and delivering of a joined up approach are key, and we work to ensure that there's a focus on not just what we are doing, but how we do it. So to give an example of this, if you wanted to go away and research some of the other stuff that the Plymouth does, I'd really recommend looking at Poole Farm and the Derriford Community Park more widely. And some of that started off initially through a vision around transport and the road scheme. But what we've got from that is a community farm, ecotherapy, the beavers that you saw earlier on, seed nurseries, cycle paths, a community orchard, apprenticeships, all of which are rooted in that particular place and connected up various different communities around there through connection to the environment. But there's other things that we've been doing as well around green skills and jobs. And in our Kickstarter programme, delivered as part of the Plymouth Natural Grid project with National Trust and Real Ideas, which is a local organisation to us, we managed to get a 100% retention rate within the programme. And the young people that took part with that are now flourishing in new roles, both in and outside of the green sector. So those of you who are looking to replicate this model elsewhere, would really encourage you to think about the wider benefits of this and how central that can be to setting up a business case in the first place. So returning back to partnerships, which I mentioned right at the start of this, our new approach has already enabled us to make positive changes, delivering for people, planet, and place. Alongside our work to develop the Habitat Bank, we've been working on a range of other initiatives with equivalent aims and objectives. Much of this work has been invaluable in informing our work for the creation of OCN, Ocean City Nature, as Chris outlined earlier, as well as building partnerships that will continue to support future investment propositions. And the ones you can see around the outside there are just a handful of the different organisations that we've worked with and complement this wider agenda here in Plymouth. I just wanted to pick up a few examples. So first of all, the National Marine Park that Kat mentioned in passing. So Kat is hugely busy on the Habitat Bank, but has fingers in various pots, and one of the significant ones there is the National Marine Park. So again, here in Plymouth, we're really proud to be the first National Marine Park in the country, and we're learning from that to be innovative, brave, and again, inspiring others. So just to give some examples of what we've got planned for that over the next 5 years, we want to connect 10 million people with the National Marine Park, engaging over 250,000 people, activating 100,000 hours of volunteer time, increasing visitor numbers from 5 million to 6 million, creating nearly 500 jobs and delivering 18.4 million, and also providing a positive vehicle to engage people with the climate. As I said earlier, my portfolio isn't solely on the environment side of it and green spaces, but I'm also really passionate about the net zero side, and it's really interesting to have these kind of projects to unite those two. Another thing that Kat and Chris do a huge amount of work on here is the Plymouth and South Devon Community Forest. It's been the first new community forest in decades and has really delivered, not just for our city, but for some of the neighbouring local authorities and areas as well. We're working to deliver 500 hectares of new woodland in some of our rural areas around the outside. That's more straightforward with large spaces, but we've also made sure that there are benefits here in urban spaces within our communities. And in the last year alone, Plymouth's managed to plant 3,500 trees in urban spaces. Again, that's driving forward multiple benefits. There are benefits for people and communities. There's benefits of planting those trees for flood alleviation, for carbon capture, and of course for biodiversity gain more widely. And it's been really great for a project like that to engage with local communities and specifically young people. I went to one in my ward near me at Devonport Park, and there were youth groups there were people from local schools, there were kids from neighbouring houses, all getting together to join in with the planting and be part of that co-creation of that habitat. Wanted to briefly mention Green Minds. So Green Minds is something Plymouth City Council has been running for several years now. It's an innovation fund really looking at the potential of rewilding. So not just rewilding places, but also that concept of rewilding people and connecting people with nature. We recently launched something called the Green Community Hubs, which really has that at its core. Plymouth Natural Grid, I alluded to earlier, all about green recovery and nature returns funding. It's been delivering enhancements to our places in a manner that supports young people. We've got a Green Thinkers programme, we've got a Kickstart scheme, we've also got formal apprenticeships linked up with that, which have been really successful. Our approach to diversity and inclusion was nationally recognised at the Kickstarter Awards, and it's delivered biodiversity net gain across 12 key sites, enabling us to better understand this approach, which is fed into the Habitat Bank, and the costs of delivery on those key urban sites. So just to summarise that a little bit, significant scale projects are essential for our transformation. But at the heart is natural spaces for our communities, the green space outside their door, the view of the seas from their school, and them feeling that those spaces are theirs to enjoy, but also to care for. We plan and transform strategically, but all places in that network are important. How we make this all happen and how do we keep up the pace of change and the freshness of innovation requires us to be creative in finding solutions to resource this. So another part of that partnerships equation is returning back to people and places. And the thing making the biggest change is how we get everyone to feel a common purpose and their particular place within it. Our teams have been looking after our spaces, integral to the on-the-ground delivery. Not only do they now feel more ownership of that approach, but also the how we have done this and resulting in benefits such as reduced sickness rates and increased job satisfaction. Empowering our communities to be part of the change in a way that is relevant and beneficial to them. The people resource is essential, but we can't hide from the fact that so is money. And currently, as all of you know, working in local authorities, that is something in short supply. So the innovation around Ocean City Nature is looking to the future to hold that strategic vehicle with the purpose representing the beneficiaries it will deliver for various aspects, but including nature. So as hopefully you've seen over all these slides, we have great ambitions for our city and how natural places must play a key part. But our ambition isn't always matched by internal funding just from the council budgets. So Ocean City Nature offers that innovative vehicle, although not completely new approach for local authorities. We are pursuing numerous options from habitat banking to blue carbon, which might seem unusual to some. It's a fair question to ask. Why would a local authority be leading that? The simple answer for us is why not? It's different, but we're in a very different world to even a few years ago, with more challenges, less money, but a new opportunity to support the development of green finance markets. It provides a platform that enables a greater breadth of income streams, investment and revenues to be realized to benefit people and places. It isn't just about being an innovative finance solution. It represents far more than that, but we should not underestimate the importance of this financial aspect. Critically, it's about thinking differently about nature, turning our nature assets from an externality into genuine assets which are investable and provide revenue. There were and still are challenges in developing and implementing this, and I'm not here to just paint a rosy picture about how easy this has been. As Chris mentioned earlier, if you join the webinar tomorrow, there'll be a kind of behind the scenes look at some of the challenges and insight into that part of the journey in more detail. But we have pioneered something here, which we believe is in demand and is replicable elsewhere. We're really excited to see other local authorities on that journey. And I believe that the second one along that was our nearby city of Exeter, which is great to see. Integrity is key to this. And as we've talked about, defining the principles and values of how one approaches this is a vital element to ensure we are on track and delivering to the highest standards possible within an open market. I would, however, leave you with this. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Local authorities are perfectly positioned to take advantage of green financing, so I would highly recommend we grasp it with both hands and with our innate values, make sure it delivers again for both people and nature. So just to sum up some of the things that we've all been talking about today, this is an opportunity for surplus income to be reinvested back into green space, not into private profit companies. I'm sure we're all nervous about the opportunities that the BNG could have for gamification, and this is a way of making sure that the local authorities are in that driving seat to ensure that there's that additional value for communities and that people can appreciate that locally. Also wanted to mention there about how local authorities are best positioned to access and fund that expertise, impacting quality and integrity in various different ways, from ecological habit management planning, but also those wider environmental partnerships, which have been so central to what we do here in Plymouth. Providing a credible local offer to work with development proposals. Those of you who work within local authorities or who are councillors in local authorities, you'll know that we all have wider corporate priorities than solely the green agenda. And we want to make sure that this complements those other priorities, whether that's social housing, for instance, or other things that we're all working hard to live on for our residents. And actually, by having this vehicle in place, it will stop barriers to those developments, making sure that we're ensuring that the green side of it is a central part of that. Again, coming back to social value and those multiple co-benefits that I talked about earlier. And finally, the opportunity for advanced habitat creation. This gives us an opportunity to really fuel ahead with that and make sure that those of you who have specific local authority biodiversity targets, that you're delivering on that, as well as all of these additional priorities. We've talked a bit about the past and how we've got here. I also want to talk about the future. So looking ahead to the next decade or so, we are still on that journey, growing, learning, sometimes making mistakes, but learning from them and moving on. This is a new path, and so supporting teams to be innovative, to fail fast, and then succeed is key. By 2030, we will have made significant progress across many areas and have embedded elements such as our new blending funding models. But there are still some thorny issues that, if resolved, could help accelerate our progress. Firstly, our nature infrastructure successes have been down to creativity and ingenuity. The systems do not always help. Natural infrastructure needs to be at the same value and systems as grey to ensure we deliver for our places and part of that infrastructure family on equal terms, which really isn't happening at the moment. Secondly, we need to enable progress in the green finance revolution, and it really is a revolution from models before. Local authorities are often constrained by financial regulations. We need to be encouraged to deliver financial innovation in this area. Thirdly, we need to enable joined up thinking across different sectors at a national level in the same way that we're trying really hard to join them up on a local level. And if I could just leave you a final thought. The thing that triggered the transformation here was changing how we thought about how we valued urban nature in particular. So rather than seeing it as a liability on a budget sheet, we wanted to see it as an asset that could deliver for the city and its people. I'm incredibly grateful to the National Trust, to the Heritage Fund, and various programmes who have helped us create this new philosophy for our work in this area and supporting us in a manner that has worked for us as a city. As I said at the beginning, Plymouth has the same diversity of the challenges of cities across the country. We're not unique in that sense. We're not free of constraints or budget challenges, certainly not. However, we wanted to achieve in Plymouth is perfectly replicable in other places, and we're really keen to keep sharing our journey so that you can help deliver on that change faster. Thanks a lot for inviting all of us to speak today, and I hope our journey has been of some interest to you. If I could pass back to Victoria for questions.
Thanks very much, Tom, David, Kat, Chris, for your insight. And I just particularly liked that point towards the end there, Tom, when you're saying, why a local authority? Well, why not? Yeah, that's just a really great place to end with the formal presentation. We've got quite a number of questions, actually, that have come in through the chat, and also a few that have come in advance. I'm going to take the host prerogative and just ask one that I did have in my back pocket to start us off with, though, if that's okay. And there's probably one for you, David, I think. But we've touched on the point earlier that PCC is actually the first investor in the Habitat Bank. So could you just tell us a little bit more about why that decision was made?
Of course. I think someone else summed it up better than me, which was why not? Which kind of answered the question, didn't it? But I mean, we're living in a changing world, and we knew that something had to change. And I think if you look at Plymouth City Council's track record, we don't like to sit back and see what other people do. So the team came up with this brilliant idea, so we've moved ahead with it. And hopefully it will be the success that I'm told it will be, and I'm absolutely 100% convinced it will be. I'm hoping that we're talking today about 3 trial sites. Maybe in 12 months' time we can come back. We've expanded that, and it's doing everything that we want it to do. So hopefully that helps a little bit with that question.
Excellent, thank you. We'll go into some of the ones that we received whilst you were all talking, if that's okay. And in particular, we're sticking with the theme of money. So, and this, yeah, I think it just flow on quite nicely. We've got a question from Rachel Morgan, who asks, how do you underpin the investor rate of return when unit sales volumes are unknown? So that might be a Kat or a Chris one before a David one, but I'll let you decide.
I think this is it comes back to the question about risks, isn't it? So you know, you can imagine when we took this to our councillors and David going, so this is all new. We don't know what the market is going to do, and we don't know how many units we're going to be able to sell because it's new. And therefore, we did a lot of work on the actual finance model with great thanks to Finance Earth around how we spread the assumed units to be very low unit sales early on, because I think we do have to be realistic. And I say it's not rose tinted glasses here. We went through, I think, 3 scrutiny sessions in the end on this, because there's an aspect of risk here around we don't know what the market's going to do. But I think what we did around engaging with developers, seeing the interest, we've had quite a lot of interest from developers, large scale, that work across country as well, about how they can work with us. And I think the other thing that we took as a existing risk is if we did nothing, our existing mechanism, the one we had before the legislation started, of getting Section 106 for these sites, would get lost. So the do nothing scenario wasn't actually a zero cost. It was probably minus £350,000 a year in terms of what over the last 10 years we averaged getting in Section 106. So this isn't just about looking at one risk. We presented all the risks, and actually the do nothing scenario was a really significant risk in itself, and therefore the small risk that we wouldn't get anyone buying our units, even though we have a 5-year housing land supply, our own schemes that are coming forward, and we had some very warm discussions already underway, seemed the lesser of the 2 risks. That you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think if join us tomorrow for our kind of detailed kind of go into kind of this, which will answer that in a bit more detail in terms of the supply and demand assessment which then led into our development of our kind of a very detailed financial model, which kind of informed our business case. And I can't kind of commend that enough. There is a detailed level of work to do here, but I think we all have commercial finance teams who can support that, and there is expertise to draw off kind of in the wider sector to kind of help inform those models and what they need to look like. But yeah, and working with stakeholders, colleagues within your own authorities who can help inform that kind of business position.
If I could just say, I think we work very closely with the team to talk about optimism bias and just being realistic. And the fact that, as I keep saying, we're using 3 test sites shows the level of risk that we're taking. And from a financial point of view, it's an investment of 500,000, and we made sure that the interest rate that we applied to that one was robust enough for the model to stand up. So it's 6.75% is what we're charging the team on that £500,000 loan. And the fact that the business case on 3 test sites can cover that gives me the confidence that there is leeway and headroom in here that we will be okay from a finance point of view, if nothing else.
Thank you very much. We've got a question about Section 106 and legal agreements, which feels to me like it is a question for tomorrow's webinar, where we'll be going into the detail, how and everything. But it feels like if we could give just a little bit of thought to that would be helpful, just in case the person who's asked this question, his name I don't know, isn't able to make it. Whilst you're thinking about the answer, I'll just make it clear that we've got the link that was put in the chat right at the start to the Notion site has got some further resources that also might help with this too. So, but the question is, how has the council navigated legal agreements needed for the off-site BNG, particularly Section 106, and how does that fit with the SPV?
Mm-hmm.
Chris, is that for you?
Yeah, I can get onto that because it's the technical stuff. So in terms of from our point, obviously there are a number of options open to different authorities depending on your situation in terms of being upper tier authorities, etc. In our situation, we are the local planning authority, we are the landowner, and I think we've had, that's one of the other reasons why the approach we've taken, which provides a segregation of distinction between Plymouth City Council as landowner, leasing these sites to our Habitat Bank, enables us to have a legal agreement back to BCC as the LPA. So it just gives another level of assurance and accountability there. But as I said, there are a number of different approaches depending on your own context, which you may wish to take. And once we have, responsible bodies kind of appointed and operational kind of in England, then will be another avenue that people will be able to pursue and utilise outside or alongside LPAs.
Great, thank you.
So,
sorry, go for it, David.
It might just be just thinking about the governance as well, and making sure that there are no conflicts of interest in terms of making sure that we have the right board members. So they need the right knowledge and understanding of what the project's trying to do, but they need to make sure that they're not wearing a PCC hat at the same time as they're trying to wear one of these hats. So just need to bear that in mind. So we've covered all that off as well.
Great, thank you. Actually, we had a question in advance a little bit about how community stakeholders will be involved in this process. Or so I don't know if Kat, is that one for you? Maybe. Feel free to ask one of your colleagues to field if I'm not getting this quite right.
No, that's good. So in terms of where we are at this stage, as we've set out, we're pretty early along in this journey. One of the key things going forward, and it was really well raised by cabinet members as well, is the process of identifying sites will actually be much more democratic than it was with Section 106. So Section 106 just had to be kind of set out, led by developers often, or the site closest by, etc. We've come up with 3 pilot sites this time, but we were challenged by councillors. So, please don't think we got this through without any challenge. We definitely got challenged, quite rightly, at many stages around how communities and ward councillors would be engaged in this going forward in terms of which sites and what happened on the sites. For the pilot sites, we had sites that we had already developed management plans with the community, so there had been involvement at that stage. And as we, if this works, as we hope it will, we will be looking for more sites, and we will be able to do that much more with communities as we go forward in terms of which sites, and making sure that the management plans, which are the basis of obviously the 30 years, are developed with those communities as well. In terms of the constitutions of the board, we are looking to widen that in the future. I wouldn't say that we've decided quite how that works. There is some more work to do on OCN as that kind of strategic board to make some decisions about quite how we want to use it and the structures of it going forward. But one of the things you would have seen on one of the earlier slides was this kind of recirculating money. So any surplus that comes back, going back into community projects. And it's things like that we still need to work on to make sure community representation is at the site level, the management level, and that benefits level as well. So I don't think to be honest, we've got all the answers yet, but we are definitely on that journey to make sure that this is the most place-based and people-engaged process.
Great, thank you, Kat. We've had, whilst you sort of mentioned future sites and land in that answer, we've had 2 slightly similar questions, one from Martin Elliott and one from Hannah Gervin, about land, actually. So Hannah asks, are you bringing any third-party landowners in? And Martin has asked, and this might not be appropriate for Plymouth, but about parish and town councils and how they may become involved. I don't think you've got any parish councils or town councils, have you? But but maybe just think about it from a third-party landowner perspective instead.
Can I start you?
Yeah, you can start.
So I think one of the things around our risk management was doing it on our own land first. Sounds like a good idea. Because we wanted to make sure that we could, we were trying lots of new things, new land management agreements, new landholder, etc. So that's why we started with that. We are already starting to talk to neighbouring local authorities about land. Hello, Hannah. We are thinking about it in terms of community forest acquisitions that we've got locally and how that might come into this mix. So I think we are definitely up for that in the future, but because of the level of newness of all of this, in terms of absolute the whole process, that's why we started with our own land first, to make sure that we could get all the processes and systems right, and then we will definitely be open to working with others. And Chris, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think captured most of that there, but I think that's where it goes back to that bigger ocean to nature model, which we showed in one of the slides there, and I think that's the advantage of having organised the governance arrangement in the way that we have. It enables us to set up sub funds, which actually may have a slightly different governance for each sort of discrete package of investable propositions which we build up and have a kind of valid business case behind them. So we may have different beneficiaries. We may actually want to have a slightly different structure because we want to bring third-party land into play, for example, for woodland creation and then woodland carbon code, woodland carbon credits kind of delivery. So again, it goes back to that point of the rationale for having that kind of broader structure. It just gives us that bit of future proofing to enable us to kind of work across different elements into the future.
Great, thank you. The next question I think we might go to is just a bit about, and it's links back to some of the content in the presentation, but about the balancing on-site first and off-site, which is obviously fundamental to the Habitat Bank. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how you're handling that?
I think it was an early discussion we had, because obviously I think the benefit actually, and this is one of the benefits of a place-based approach led by local authorities and stakeholders that are interested, is we want the right outcome. That is ultimately the key. So we do not want biodiversity destroyed on the site just so we can fund our Habitat Bank, for example. That would not benefit our place. So we have, the reason we've done the pilot, and as Chris will show you tomorrow, we are obviously clearly advertising this tomorrow in terms of come along and listen. You know, we've been very, made some low assumptions on things like sales because we don't want to be in that position. So we will always follow, because our policies say so, ensuring that impact is reduced in any way possible on sites first, and we will be encouraging developers to keep any of the biodiversity benefit on their site first, because that is the best for people and nature. The Habitat Bank was really to mitigate when we knew it had to go off site, so if it was a very tight urban site or they just couldn't get their 10% on that, then we wanted to keep that as close to Plymouth communities as we possibly could. So, you know, the finance model, as you'll see yesterday, is really robust. And I think because the values of the Habitat Bank is off place, we absolutely will be looking for everyone to do it in the right way, which starts with avoiding impacts.
Great, thank you. We've got another question which is about effectively about pricing of units and managing and balancing the kind of various elements of that. It's actually from one of your nearish neighbours, Somerset Council, Graham Thompson, has asked, how are you balancing the desire to obviously maximise the income generation, but also deliver high integrity units and ensure that the unit prices are reasonable, so as not to damage viability or not damage impact viability of development, particularly for affordable housing. I wonder if there's some, it'd be great to give an answer, but also think a little bit about explaining more about the fact that this is a not-for-profit model, which may or may not factor into those calculations.
If I just give the strategic, and I'll let Chris go into some of the detail. It was actually one of the driving forces for doing it within Plymouth. So obviously you don't have control of market forces. So actually, if we didn't do anything with an HPB in Plymouth, and nobody did locally, and they're having, you know, developers are having to start to buy statutory units. If anyone's seen the prices of those, they're quite high. And therefore, one of the reasons of doing it locally, and as you say, and a not-for-profit, so all of the money is around going back into doing good things in the city. It enabled us to cost things at a level which we felt were affordable for our place. And the other part of that is the model has got some flex in it. And therefore, if we as a Habitat Bank decided that we wanted to cost the units slightly lower for a scheme that delivered other benefits to the city, like affordable housing or sheltered housing or something where the viability was very narrow anyway, that was in our gift to be able to do it, providing that the model still stacks up. So I think it is actually a really good additional benefit of doing it locally, is you have that control and you can make sure that, you know, one great thing for the city doesn't sort of crash another great thing for the city. I don't know if you want to add a bit more about what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it does go back absolutely to the kind of the detail of your pricing. So once we selected those 3 sites, it was a really detailed piece of work to then look at those habitat management plans and cost those kind of across the board to get, a really clear picture around genuinely what it would cost, and building into that, reasonable levels of inflation cost, contingency, kind of all of the costs which we know we're going to kind of be hit with kind of over that 30-year period, and building enough risk cost in there as well to make sure that we kind of at the end of it know there's going to be enough there to do the work to the right level and to the right standard, to achieve those habitat management goals, which goes back to that point of integrity. We've also built in kind of as much as we can kind of costs therefore around kind of providing access to those sites for people, so making sure the infrastructure standards are to the best level possible. One, because that benefits the habitats themselves, and it kind of keeps people kind of on the straight and narrow to a greater degree, kind of through those sites, and minimise disturbance, but also and gives best chance for people to access those sites and appreciate the benefits of being there. And that all feeds through that whole business model, that whole financial modelling, feeding those numbers through to kind of come to the end point to ensure and then test and challenge whether you've got a viable business model, and that's giving us that kind of as greater level of assurance as we possibly can that it's going to be viable. And we know that kind of we've got various levels we can model unit pricing out within that to kind of see, okay, well, if we price it up here, well, actually that breaks it. If we price it down here, well, okay, that means that we don't make enough money over time. So there's having that model there to play around with is really key.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go the next, well, not the next question, but the next question I'm going to ask you is a little bit about how this has been a trailblazer, and about how do we replicate the practice, given that some of the context won't be exactly the same. Just whilst you're maybe thinking about how replicable you think this is or isn't, I'm just going to do one more quick plug for the resources site. That the link is in the chat, so there's a little bit more information on there with some links to more of the detail that will be covered in tomorrow's webinar, and the exactly how-to elements of it. But there's also a step-by-step guide where we've tried to kind of break down some of the this is what you need to do. It's not a completely linear journey, but as far as possible we've tried to break it down, just that might be useful, as well as a couple of other documents, including more detail on the high integrity principles that were referenced throughout, and some thinking about the different legal models, so the options that Plymouth considered but did not go down. So you'll find that all on the Notion site that's in the chat. But to the panel, how replicable do you think this is?
I think it's highly replicable. I think, as said, why would you not want to do this if it's possible in your area? I think we are, as a local authority, we're held by the same rules as every other local authority. So there's been no special dispensation for us in terms of how we've developed this. I think the replicability comes back, I think, more to what land you've got available, how your partnerships work, and that might not be exactly the same. But I think one of the reasons that we've had support, and therefore we're doing these webinars and other things to share it, is we want to trailblaze it so others could follow. So we've tried to do everything we can in a way that shows it's not special what we've achieved here. Actually, it can be done elsewhere. I think the website you've talked about the different stages to it. I think we've been down some rabbit holes and come up the other side. So we're, some of those don't do this as useful probably, and how to set out the propositions, and David and Tom might want to comment on this, of how to sell it to your senior leadership team is really key around, not hiding the risks. I think we were always very open about there were risks in this process, but there were risks of not doing it. I think in terms of the legal agreements and the management agreements as templates and things we can share, I think the biggest thing about making it replicable is making sure that you can put forward an argument that is very specific to your place, because the mechanics behind it can probably be quite similar. you're probably just working with slightly different people and slightly different land. But I don't know whether Tom or David want to comment on that, because I think how you sell it though is going to be the key part.
I'm happy to come in on that. Yeah, so it's been a really interesting process. The work they're talking about has been going on for a couple of years, and then the conversations that I had to have with a new cabinet, trying to bring myself up to speed and them up to speed quickly to really make sure that we were accelerating ahead with this. So there are a few hurdles you have to cross, and Chris did a really good job earlier in clarifying the processes around this, you know, the legal mechanisms, the BNG legislation from the Environment Act. It requires a certain level of subject knowledge to start to see the benefits. So there are challenges in communicating that side of it. From a public-facing point of view as well, it's difficult to know what the top lines should be. You know, the moment you use the phrase habitat bank, it doesn't necessarily mean something as a headline in a council press release. And so really trying to bring it back to those co-benefits I was discussing earlier. So the fact that this is about enhancing wetland habitats. This is about making the woods that you visit even more attractive, and you know that it's going to be supporting you know, better ecosystems and different bird species and all of those things that the various people, irrespective of their demographics, would want to see for their local natural sites. So I think it's really important in the comms to keep going back to that thing about both nature and people, and you know what David said earlier about the risk side of it. We've set up a loan for £500,000. That money is being invested into enhancing these green sites. As Kat said earlier, there would be a financial risk to not doing this. There'd be a potential future risks as well to allowing this to solely be dominated by the private sector. So, you know, on reflection and for all of those reasons, actually, you know, our cabinet certainly accepted that quite quickly, and because of the expertise of Kat, Chris, and the team, you know, we're very excited and confident about this pilot, you know, working out.
If I could just add a little bit to that, I suppose, about going back to the governance again, and the fact that yes, we are the first local authority to go down this route, so therefore it is a new scheme, a new way of doing things. So just some lessons to learn, I suppose. I think it was Chris that said 3 cabinet decision meetings to get us to this point. So about the governance, about the setting up of the company, and then about the terms of the loan and so on. We've been open and transparent all the way through this, and it has been a couple of years, but we have made sure that our audit and governance committee are fully briefed, and we've had training sessions with them to, as Tom said, get them up to speed. We've had pre-scrutiny meetings to make sure that that's been, everybody has had a chance to look at all these numbers, including when we went out to the public engagement for our 23-24 budget proposals. It formed part of that. And we've had a very positive response back from the general public about what we're trying to do, and the fact that they appreciate that sometimes you have to do things in a different way in order to achieve new results. So just be aware that it has been quite a journey, but we've been open, we've been transparent with everybody, and we have embraced the risks, and everybody's aware of what we're trying to do here.
And I think hopefully that shows it is replicable, because, you know, we did go through challenge and scrutiny and challenge again on this. So it's been well tested, and all our cabinet reports are, like everyone's, are online. You know, we want to be really open about enabling people to do this and follow if they want to. So please do take a look at all those resources, because hopefully that will help show that, you know, there's no mystery here. It's just a lot of hard work with a lot of partners to kind of just get this to a point where we're giving it a trial, and we will keep rolling out how it's going so people can see as well. So I think it's really important that, you know, in a year's time, where are we and how is it going?
Thank you. That's really a really important point. And thanks for your sort of openness in that approach. We've got another finance question, so I'm looking at you, David, if that's okay, although it is on the Habitat Bank side, not on the council side. So this questioner, who is anonymous, has asked, have you calculated or included interest on the 30-year endowment funds? And if so, are you using Green Book methodology for that, or varying it according to the current financial outlook? Yeah, it's definitely got David written all over that one.
I'm looking at Chris actually, because he's taken that project to find out exactly. So I did mention, I mean, the thing is, when we started talking about this, we were able to borrow money a lot cheaper than we can at the moment. So even at that point, we were quite strict with the team about what we would be charging in terms of the interest rate. So I did mention that we've been open and transparent. It's 6.75%. So we've got some headroom there. We're all hoping that the rates have peaked, and that all the indications are that they will come down. So yeah, we've covered that off. But Chris, you
yeah, I mean, I think the question is a little bit more around effectively the endowment that we're building up, so through sales. So, you know, our model, which we work with, looks at us kind of peaking at kind of our capital reserve in kind of about year 12 of the model. So at that point, we've kind of, I can't remember what number we get to, but I have to look back at the figures, but we get to our kind of peak of reserves. And then, yeah, we'll be obviously through that period, as we build that, we'll be investing that. And there's some more detail on this in the webinar tomorrow, in terms of where that goes. Like it's another member of our finance team will talk a bit more detail around what funds we'll use to kind of build up that interest. I'm not entirely sure on the Green Book element of that, but we can look into that. But yes, and then we're effectively paying down on that for those year 13 onwards is where we use that endowment fund to make sure that we get to at least year 30. I think our model at the minute shows that we can get beyond that, but obviously that is wholly reliant on our model. So, you know, depending on sales and realizing those sales and the values attached to them, that will kind of play out over that period of time. So that's, I think, hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. We've got a number of more technical questions, which is definitely going to come up tomorrow. So I'm trying to pick out the ones that perhaps are better suited to this audience. So we've got another one about collaboration, actually. And whilst this is slightly different to the Plymouth City Council experience, I'm just interested in the panel's views. Stephen Draper has asked, could you conceive that a number of parish councils or smaller local councils could collaborate to potentially within a national landscape or ANOB around a habitat bank as a kind of a collaborative approach to habitat banking, I suppose. Any thoughts on that? Maybe Kat, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's going to be what we need, don't we? We just started on this journey, kind of not quite knowing where we were going to end up by the end, in terms of we wanted a different model of how we did things that was more sustainable. And I think it works in the city in terms of what we're doing at the scale we're starting with in terms of pilot. But I think when you look at our ambitions for Ocean City Nature, it could definitely be our surrounding neighbours. So we could become like a hub and spokes model in terms of that. I think it would make a lot of sense if whatever your place is, and whether it's parishes or towns or a national landscape, work together, because there are admin costs, if you like, and finance costs for running the habitat bank, which probably don't make sense for every single tiny place to have that burden. But there's also a mix of expertise you need to make it work that might not be in one place, but it might be if you collaborated. So yeah, I would highly recommend looking at your place, whatever scale that is, and working out where the sweet spot is. We've been asked from places up country actually about whether we could provide a habitat banking service for them. And actually we're like, well, you're probably better having regional or a place-based in your area to keep it close to where you are. We would definitely be keen to work with people in our local area, and I think quite where that sweet spot is, I don't think anyone knows yet, because we're all starting on this journey. But I think collaboration is really important, but also that we don't start competing, actually. So actually, if you're doing it in your place with your partners and you're all collaborating, it's a win-win for everyone. And I think it's just finding that right level where it's close to where you're operating and you're really embedded in that place, but we're not sort of reaching across the country to kind of go into other areas, because actually that's not really how and the values we've set this up with. So hopefully that helps. I think the scale will depend on the place and how many units you create and how much development is coming through the system. Because if you've got very little development, you probably don't want to send up lots of little HVVs, which are going to struggle to get their business models to work.
Great, thank you. I'm just looking at time. I think we've probably got one more question, which is about the cost of how you've costed units, and whether or not in the future you're anticipating the need to buy land to create biodiversity units.
I think at this stage we've got 29 in the city potential sites.
More than that now.
More than that now. So we've got a little pipeline without needing to locally where we are. However, as we said, our neighbouring local authorities is buying land through our community forest initiative, and we're hopeful that we can work with them on any biodiversity net gain they develop. I don't think it's in the short term, but I think when you look at the wider green finance opportunities, we might look at it for that reason rather than just specifically around BNG, because I think there might be value in that in terms of things like carbon clubs that the city might want to buy into locally. So it's not in our initial right this minute plan, but I think it's definitely part of the bigger OCN plan if that becomes appropriate. But it might not be Plymouth City Council buying it. It could be a neighbour or a partner or an organisation we're working with that then links for the HVV. So I think there's lots of collaboration options that aren't just black and white on that.
Great, thank you. We have not got through all of the questions. There are a few more. I think actually we will get through most of the others tomorrow, but if not, we will supply written answers to anybody that's asked a question that hasn't had it answered. With 1 minute left, I'll just leave it back with the panel for any final words that you haven't had a chance to say now that you'd like to. Yeah.
To say, Victoria, there's a few bits in the chat about people asking us if we'd like to attend stuff. We'll come back to them separately. There's some nice offers in there, but we'll come back. Thank you.
Victoria, could I just add briefly, I said earlier about all of the different partners who've helped to get this off the ground, who've worked with us, researched, funded, but I also wanted to say a huge thank you to Chris and Kat. You know, this would not have happened without their expertise and drive and really making sure that the politicians and finance people like David are buying into that argument. So thanks again for everything they've done to move this forward over the last few years.
Hear, hear. Wonderful. I think we will, it's bang on time at 3:30. We will leave it here for today, but as you've heard once or twice today, we're running another webinar tomorrow. So if you would like to know more, if this has whetted your appetite and you would like to know more about the ins and outs, the hows, the not what's to do, the what's to do and top tips, then please join us tomorrow afternoon. There's a link in the chat currently. Check out the resources that this project and another NERF funded project have helped to develop. And thank you all for your interest.